This is a British cultural story that takes place in the 1950s. Please enjoy Evening Rituals. Part 1, United Kingdom, year 1950s. Part, Evening Rituals, Chapter 1. Hi, my. UK family and YouTube family. Hello. Hi. The living room was the heart of the house, a small, warm stage where the family gathered after a day of work and school, and the coal fire in the grate was more than heat. It was life itself. Outside, rows of terraced houses and narrow streets carried the soft echo of footsteps and distant buzz. Breaks, but inside Mother's hands were busy smoothing the creased tablecloth while Father, in his shirt sleeves, propped his shoes up beside the fender and gently raked the coals to keep the glow even. In most British homes in the early 1950s, there was no central heating. A single open coal fire in the living room was the main source of warmth, and everything, the kettle, the basket of newspapers, the child's wooden toys, orbited that fire as if around a tiny sun. The furniture had a quiet, practical dignity. A three-seat sofa with a removable antimacassar on the headrest, a pair of well-worn armchairs, a wooden sideboard where greeting cards were kept, and a coal scuttle standing proud nearby with brass tongs and a poker. These were not decorations, so much as familiar friends. After years of wartime austerity and utility furniture schemes, many families still own plain, durable pieces that would not shout, but would last. Newly married couples sometimes hoped for brighter pieces, but most houses kept to simple, useful forms until the economy allowed more color and choice. Evenings had their small, steady rituals. As dusk settled, Mother would put the kettle on and lay out a plate of crusty bread and dripping, or perhaps a small plate of tinned sardines for a quick nibble. Reminders that rationing had only recently lifted. Sugar and sweets were more freely available after 1953, and meat rationing finally ended in 1954. So treats were welcomed as small signs that harder years were passing. Children washed in a large basin and, with hair still damp, padded into the living room to claim their favorite cushion near the fire guard. The smell of soap and coal and the warm dark of the room folded around them like a blanket. The radio was still a constant companion. The BBC voice threaded through the night with news, comedy, and music, but by the middle of the decade a family treasure appeared in some homes, the television set. Where there was a set, it often sat on a low wooden stand, a small black box with dials and a tiny screen, and the family would arrange chairs like an audience, all drawn to the flickering picture. When the screen glowed with a variety show, a drama, or a royal broadcast, people hushed and leaned in together. Television was becoming a window onto a wider world and an extraordinary shared household experience. The sights and textures of the room were intimate and exact. Curtains might be floral or plain, often in soft pastels, buttercup yellow, mint green, or a muted pink, colors that hinted at a new domestic optimism even in modest homes. Teapots were warmed on the hob, a patchwork rug softened the floor, and a fireguard kept tiny feet safe. Father sometimes read the evening paper by lamplight, while Mother mended a sock or sewed a button back onto a shirt. The tick of the mantel clock marked out small certainties in a world that, only a few years earlier, had been uncertain in ways no one wished to repeat. Stories you hear from people who lived through those nights return to the same small details. The hiss and snap of coal as it burned, the way a child's homework sat open on a lap, the tug of a blanket over knees. A neighbor might call round with a plate of boiled potatoes. A cousin arriving unannounced could be invited in to warm their hands by the fire. Conversation was ordinary and sacred at once. Sometimes the mood was light, laughter over a radio comedy, the family singing a popular tune. Sometimes the mood was quieter, worries about the rising cost of things, hopes for a better job, or the heaviness of a long day. Through it all, the living room's small light held steady. Children's toys were simple and durable: wooden trains, tin soldiers, a handmade doll, perhaps a small tin car. In the evenings, a father might smooth railway tracks across the rug or work on a small model, while explaining how things were built in his day. Mothers treasured little comforts: a patchwork cushion, an embroidered doily, a photograph on the mantel, objects that made a house feel like a home. Birthdays and small celebrations were modest but heartfelt: a homemade cake, a single string of colored bunting, neighbors popping their heads in to share a cup of tea. The sense of togetherness, of ordinary lives stitched together by kindness and routine, is what many who remember the 1950s most cherish. There were practical compromises too. If the winter was especially cold, people used hot water bottles wrapped in flannel, or left the oven door open for a while after cooking to share heat. Cold deliveries, the smell of soot on clothes, and regular maintenance of the grate were everyday chores rather than exceptional ones. Going to bed meant pulling heavy blankets up to the chin and leaving the living room. Warm embers to die down safely before the family finally switched off the lamp. Even small moments could become vivid memories, a neighbor bringing over a tin of sweets. Now that sugar was more available, the excitement of hearing on the radio that a distant relative had returned from abroad, the awe of seeing a coronation parade on television or newsreel footage and sharing the images. By the glow of the set, domestic life in the 1950s was shaped by recovery. Houses were being repaired, tastes were changing, and people were turning toward a future they hoped would be kinder. The living room at night was where hopes could quietly be named and passed forward. Plans for a new coat, for brighter curtains, for a small holiday to the coast when money allowed. If you close your eyes and imagine a 1950s British living room at night, you will almost smell the coal and tea, hear the muffled sounds of the street, and feel the hush that comes when a family leans in together, a hush that means safety, conversation, and the small courage of carrying on. Those cozy nights by the fire were not simply about warmth, they were about belonging, about conversation that knits people together, and about quiet acts of care that made ordinary life resilient. If you enjoyed this authentic look at a 1950s British family evening by the fire and would like more true and carefully researched stories from the past, please visit our channel. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your loved ones. Also, be sure to leave your beautiful and valuable thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you enjoyed about the story and what you'd like to see next. Thank you for watching, UK family and YouTube family. Hello again and good night.